A lot of times when we think of grief and loss, it's just the person that we lost.
Yeah.
Versus grief can look like with the life you thought you were going to have, the dreams that you had, the goals, the timeline that you put in place that now has to be altered. And what I'm noticing, especially with a lot of Black women, as resilient as we are, we're tired.
Welcome to the latest word. I am Brittany Jones. It's always good to be back here with you folks, and we have lots to talk about today, especially because Black women have always been the first to work and the last to be protected. But today, this economy is locking us out. According to the Economic Policy Institute, 2025 marked the worst year for Black women's employment in a quarter century. Joining me now to talk about the impact this has on Black women's mental health is Dr. Charmain Jackman, the founder and CEO of InnerPsych and the author of Black Therapist's Guide to Private Practice and Entrepreneurship, and Lauren Michelle Jackson, founder and owner of the Cultivate Your Essence Therapy. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Brittany. It's lovely to be here again.
Yes, happy to have you back, and Lauren, to have you here for the first time. And so, like I said, we have lots to talk about because me being a Black woman who have actually experienced the layoff, job going bankrupt, and actually losing our jobs and had nowhere to come back to, which is what led to this show in the first place. And so just knowing what I have brought to my therapist and the issues and the struggles that I've dealt with, I want to talk about, have you all had clients that are dealing with job loss and what have been some of their struggles? And Dr. Jackman, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean it's so rampant, and I think for Black women, I love the intro you said we're not protected. I think what I've seen happen with clients and with friends as well, like this is really hard. Um, it comes out of nowhere, right? They don't follow protocol many times. And so they're really just shocked. So there's a sense of a feeling of betrayal. There's anger, there's worry, because, right, oftentimes they're the breadwinners of their families.
Mhm.
And particularly in this economy, you're like, well, where am I going to go? Nobody's hiring. Nobody's hiring people who look like me, right? So there's all that angst that comes up with this. Again, worry, fear, betrayal, anger, that just is unwarranted, and that really affects their mood, their sleep,
Mhm.
right? And also can lead to more anxiety.
Yeah.
And Lauren, what about you? What have you been seeing or hearing?
You know what? I've been having a lot of clients where it's just a constant state of like PTSD, mainly because this isn't their first time facing a
Mhm.
layoff, or it's
Mhm.
that anticipation of, am I going to be the next one on the chopping block?
Mhm.
So, even with, I have actually a client right now, she's been doing her job for so long and works with like the city of Chicago. And one of the biggest things is because there's been so many changes within her department, they're essentially changing her job structure in such a way that now she's kind of like, I'm miserable at my job with something I was actually very confident
Mhm.
and looked forward to getting up to in the morning. And
Mm.
now it's just a matter of we're trying to work on what are the new coping skills to help get her through, because 5 years from now she'll be able to retire,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things I'm seeing a lot of people is like, with my clients in particular, they're trying to hold on as much as possible because
Right.
with this economy, they weren't prepared for what does life look like after that
Right.
job is gone, right? Whether it's voluntarily or even if it's like they're pushed out. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
anxiety that I'm noticing.
Mm.
Definitely a lot of the grief and loss that a lot of times we don't think
Mhm.
about it. A lot of times when we think of grief and loss, it's just the person that we lost.
Yeah.
Versus grief can look like with the life you thought you were going to have, the dreams that you had, the goals, the timeline that you put in place that now has to be altered. And what I'm noticing, especially with a lot of Black women, as resilient as we are, we're tired. And
Mm.
I think that's one of the biggest things that we're seeing is the exhaustion is taking place to now. It's kind of like we're just going throughout the day, like, let me just make it through this day. Let me just make it through this day, which in one moment it helps you to stay grounded in the present, but it's also kind of like a dissociation where we're wondering, okay, but when the bubble pops, how are you going to respond? And it's a difference between reacting and responding. Cause like, when we were talking off air, when you're in such a distress, and you just sign off on different things that you don't realize is going to impact you later, again, that's a reaction. Responding takes time for you to actually process, come up with a game plan, and really think about how is this going to impact me and those I care about too. So it's a whole gamut of things that we're seeing in this.
Yeah. And you touched on this about just being exhausted and feeling tired and carrying the weight, carrying the burden. And so I think about rejection. And when we are feeling rejection
Yes.
after rejection for the ones who are applying for jobs and they aren't getting the answers that they want, what does this do to you mentally and emotionally and physically when you experience
Oh my
this?
goodness. You know, I always, I'm sure you remember this book, Dr. Charmain, The Body Keeps Score. And it's kind of just like your body responds to some ways, they build a tolerance to it. But then after a while, it's kind of just like to a distressing point to where you're kind of just like, I don't know how to even react or respond in these moments, right? And if you really think about it, for a lot of us who are millennials, we went through this numerous times again. Like I think about millennials and how many different things we've experienced. There is an exhaustion where there's not sleep that can fix it. There's not always the medication that can help balance out things, but it doesn't necessarily speak to what that experience is. So you might be seeing a little bit more depressive symptoms. You might be a little bit more agitated, which, you know, we as Black women are told, oh, they just have an attitude problem. They're just angry. No, we're responding to the different things that life has constantly thrown at us, and we're doing the best that we can. Because for some reason, Black women are not looked at as human because we're just so strong, which those things were projected onto us. And I really think it wasn't until this whole Kamala Harris thing where everybody was like, no, we're tired. We're going to tap out for a little bit. We'll come back when we feel like it, or if things get too off the rails, or we'll pick and choose what we'll be a part of, which I think is actually a healthy response to everything, because now we can't ignore how much this is actually impacting us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I really agree with you, Dr. Lauren. I think the other piece is it really kind of affects your sense of self-worth, or it can affect
Yes.
your sense of self-worth, particularly for people whose identities are tied to their jobs, right? They love what they do, they're great at it, and
Mhm.
now you're no longer able to do this thing, right? So I think about that piece. I think about the numbness, right? You kind of hinted at that too, Dr. Lauren, right? Like you're like constantly taking everything. At some point you're just like you shut down emotionally
Mhm.
and then you're numb, right? And I think about women who are caring for families, whether they are children or older adults,
Parents.
particularly,
Mhm.
yeah, we're in this, many of us are in this sandwich generation, right? And so there's that worry about what does that mean for, again, my life financially, how do I support my family? So I just think it's a lot, and I really want to help women be strategic when they're in this situation. I remember, my a situation where I was let go from a job that I thought I was going to get, right? They call you in, you have no idea what's going to happen, right? And you might cry in that moment, or you might try. I think I try to like, I'm not gonna let them see me cry. Right.
Mhm.
That was the thing. I just was
Yep,
like,
I've been.
y'all not
Mhm.
gonna see me
Yep.
break.
Hmm.
Right. But like couldn't wait to get out of there. But I don't think they see our pain. Right. And
No.
so that is the pain that many of us are carrying. And I'm so glad you highlighted the grief and loss around this too. So I think that pain. And so how do we navigate that pain, right? Our role with clients is to help them name that, right? And it may be hard, right? Some of my clients,
Mhm.
they want to, like, I want to go there. I'm like, we got to face it. We got to, not right now, maybe, but we have to face that pain, right? Because that's part of the journey of healing.
Mhm.
And you talked about that the pain, and it just makes me think about what are the warning signs of saying the stress has crossed into a mental health crisis at this point?
I think there's going to be a period, like I think about grief, right? Where you just aren't getting up, like it's too pain, it's too hard. And I think you owe yourself to allow yourself to go through that moment, right? You have to, right? It's part of it. But then it's like, at some point, and it doesn't mean it goes away right away, but then at some point, are you noticing you're not able to get back to your daily duties, right? Are you getting up and taking a shower and looking for a job? Are you going out with family? Are you going out with friends, right? So when you notice maybe you're totally withdrawn, don't want to leave your room, don't want to interact with people, those are definitely some warning signs.
Mhm.
And Dr. Laurie share some too.
No, I definitely co-sign everything you say. And I think one of the biggest things too that a lot of times people don't recognize is the insomnia. Because a lot of times at night, that is typically when those thoughts are going to come racing. And it's because your body and your mind is kind of like, okay, well, this is our state to relax.
Yeah.
But in the back of your mind, it's like, well, this is the time we need to panic because nothing else is a distraction for us, right? So, really paying attention to your sleep habits. Because if you're starting to notice that insomnia is starting to come at a chronic state, and when we say chronic, it's like 3 months plus, right? What are some of the other things that could be happening? Because a lot of times when we're grieving, it's not just one thing. It's typically a multitude of things. So you're talking about like the loss of identity, the loss of the job, the anxieties of being the breadwinner, but also too is just kind of like the lack of control. Because a lot of times we really think that we have so much control, like we can detail every little bit of our lives, right? But in reality, when things like this happens, it really reminds you just how little control you have. And that is something that I've noticed, especially with my Black women clients. That is the hardest thing to really address because we've been conditioned in such a way. And notice I say conditioned, we're not wired that way. We've been conditioned in such a way that if we are not always 10 steps ahead, there's some type of consequences that we typically face. Right. And so that's a lot of the things that I want you to pay attention to as well. How much of a grip are you really holding on to? And the idea of just allowing yourself to breathe and really take things one thing at a time, as childish as that may sound, that actually can help save your life in that regardless.
Yeah.
And how dangerous is this narrative? Because we talked about it, right? About that push to be this strong person, this strong Black woman, carrying all of the things. And when you think about this, has been a lot of our experiences just because, like you said, we've been conditioned to think that's what we had to do. What does that do to our bodies or our mental health over time? And Dr. Jackman, you can answer that first, and then I want to hear from you, Lauren.
Yeah, I think that over time, right? It's like one, you get used to these ways of being, and they become normal for you,
Mhm.
and so you don't even recognize that you're in the danger zone because danger zone has just become normalized. It's just part of your day to day, right? And so that is actually one of the biggest risks is that we don't notice those subtle signs or those signs where things are starting to change, where we could actually do something before things get to that, red, fire
Danger.
alert kind of state.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the biggest things for Black women. I think we've been so conditioned to putting on, our armor and moving through and being strong that when we aren't able to be that, it's almost like the complete opposite where you just fall flat, right? And so how do we kind of figure out where the middle comes into that play? Um, I think the other piece is around we can also not feel like we deserve to be well, right? That we deserve to heal, that we deserve to go to therapy, or we deserve to take a day off, right? It can become like if we're not doing, then there's something wrong with that. So I think those are some of the worries that I bring to or I see in the women that I support. It's like they're just, many of them are leaders, they're high achievers, that's where they thrive and not having access to, their job or their work, they just feel at a loss what they can do.
Yeah. It's funny. We were having this conversation. I was speaking on a panel a couple of weeks ago, and we had one participant in the audience just said, I can't afford to break down. Mind you, lost her brother, 6 months later, lost his wife,
Hmm.
raising the children, unemployed, was trying to get back into the workforce, literally was out of work for almost a year. And the idea that she couldn't give herself the permission to just be and fall apart. That was the mindset she had. I can't afford to fall apart because if I do, what will happen? And all of us on the panel was like, yeah, but if you don't, the people that you say that you care about, they're going to miss out on you the most on top of all of that, right? So I think that's a mindset when we're talking about it's not feeling worthy and not recognizing that that is your birthright and that is something you have access to.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest things is that I see is that being so strong that is almost looked at as like a weakness or a failure that you need support,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so one of the biggest things is we forget that community is what our people use to made it through all these hard times. And so, yes, while you'll have your girlfriends, your sisters, your mom, and all these other places, actually seeking out the support that you need is still a big one too. Because I had somebody that was like, I knew I was supposed to work with you like 2 years ago, but I'm finally ready now. And it's kind of like, well, what happened now? Oh, well, this crisis happened, and then this, and then and I was like, so we really waited till you were fully depleted. Because now it's kind of like one of those things. I tell people all the time, it's best for you to know what your limits are and how really paying attention to how your body and your mind is responding to things. Because when your body tells you to sit down, you cannot control when it's going to tell you you can get back up. It's kind of just like if you guys have your phone chargers, Lord, and don't have an iPhone. If it's sitting in that sun too long, and it would literally just shut down. And that happened to me in a session. I felt
In
so
there.
bad. But it
Yeah.
was kind of like until it felt like it was regulated enough to actually function again, it was like, oh, you can't utilize me. You better figure it out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those are some of the things that I'm noticing. It's kind of just like we're waiting too long to seek the support,
Yeah.
whether it's going to the doctor, whether it's seeing the therapist, whether it's making sure I'm actually eating throughout the day, making sure I'm breathing throughout the day.
Mhm.
10 minutes of just doing nothing. Those are some of the red flags that I noticed because, like you said, things have been so normalized just to push through that paying attention to ourselves almost seems very selfish when in actuality it's about self-preservation.
Yeah. And in my book, and Miss Brittany would help me talk about the Black Therapist Guide to Private Practice and Entrepreneurship. We actually have a chapter on well-being for the entrepreneur, but it actually applies to everybody. And it's we
Mhm.
talk about the mind, body, spirit alignment and 7 things you can do. Social support is one of them, right? That
Yeah,
rest, right? Taking that power nap, tactical napping, right?
I
I think
love
about the
tech.
sleep piece that you talk about is like the either get into sleep or staying asleep.
Mm-hmm.
That mental space, that 10-minute, that screen break, that walk around your neighborhood, or even looking outside is really important. Your
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, movement, right? And I'm missing one more. Spirituality. How can I forget that one?
Yes.
Mhm.
Spirituality, right? So whether that's your religious beliefs or even just your connection to nature or your
Mm-hmm.
gratitude list.
Yeah.
Um, I know I have to hop off in a minute or two, but I do want to talk about, in addition to the mental health piece in terms of support, like you mentioned, Dr. Lauren, a big piece is also ensuring that, particularly when you've been laid off or fired, you need to consult with a lawyer. There have been too many times where Black women, they just sign that document because they're so activated in that moment, they're so betrayed, they're angry, and they feel like they have to sign the document that they've been given. Don't.
Yep.
Talk to a lawyer. That person will allow you to advocate because what I've found is that when women have been able to then regulate, they've gone through whether therapy or they've found their way out of that situation,
Right.
they realize that the deal they got was not great.
Yep.
So it's one thing that we don't do enough of talking about, being strategic, document what has happened,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
document the process.
Yep.
If you haven't been given a correction, what do they call it?
Performance improvement plan.
Performance
Mm-hmm.
improvement plan, right? They have to do that before they fire you. I know they
Mm-hmm.
can have all kind of excuses, right? So, but it's really important for you to know your rights,
Yeah.
and don't sign until you consult with a lawyer.
For
That's
sure. That's definitely a part of the community piece too, for sure.
yeah.
And I was gonna say in our last 30 seconds, I would love for you just to kind of add a piece on a message to Black women right now who are going
Mhm.
through these things and what they can do? What's a message to them to still make sure that they feel seen and heard during this time when they're having these experiences?
Yeah. I can go. I think one of the biggest things is I want you to take up all the space and really recognize that you needing support is you being human. And what I mean by take up all the space is a lot of times we kind of cower behind, well, we don't want to be too much. Well, I don't want to be a victim. I don't want You're entitled to all the different ranges of emotions, regardless of the ones they try to label us as negative. Feelings are feelings. There's not right or wrong. It's just how we respond to them. So the more you're identifying your feelings, the more you're identifying your safe supports. I want you to take up all the space because you are definitely worthy of that, and recognize it might be a while, but pace yourself at the pace that actually realistically works for you. Not what you think you should do, not what other people tell you to do. That's how you honor yourself in this transitional season.
So good
Yeah,
with the
I
kids.
love that. Yeah, that's great. Honor yourself and what you need, right? I think I will kind of stay on that line and really listen to your body. Um, a lot of times we don't trust our instinct, we don't trust our gut, but take that time to, pour back into you, like reevaluate. Sometimes that job wasn't really the job for you. And it's a job you wanted to leave, right?
Mhm.
So, and sometimes it's not, right? But maybe it is. Maybe it's an opportunity to tap into something else that you wanted to pursue in your life, right? Maybe you
Mhm.
wanted to find more balance, right? So I would say listen to your mind, your body, and spirit, and know that the timing that things happen, there's probably a better plan out there for you. You just don't know it yet.
For sure.
That's awesome. I believe that. I certainly believe that. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for your time. I'm excited because so many Black women need to hear this message right now because not enough people are talking about it. And that's why we're here at The Latest Word. So I am looking forward to bringing you all back.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye, Brittany.